All right, hello everyone at NAHJ. My name is Correspondent, and thank you for joining us for our second NAHJ webinar presented by CBS News. Glad that you could join us today. Today we have a very interesting conversation regarding digital journalism and our video journalism program. So I wanted to introduce two of our guests here at CBS News who are going to talk about the program and give you some of their experiences, how it evolved, and all those important things that if you are an electronic journalist and you are looking to perhaps move into this kind of field, this would be very informative for you today. So I'm going to introduce first Adriana Diaz, who's our correspondent who was based in New York and is now based in Chicago, and she's waving. Hello, Adriana. She just came back from a shoot for CBS this morning, so we got her at a good time, and she can explain a little bit about her role in the VJ program, her role as a correspondent, and how she produces, and all the gear that she uses. And then I'm also going to introduce you to Tim Gaughan, who is our head of digital news gathering here at CBS News, and he also heads up our special events program. And he's going to talk a little bit about the evolution of the program and how it works. And after we begin, I also want to let you know that you can ask us some questions using the Q&A chat feature. I'll be jumping back and forth to look at that, so feel free to get your questions ready. And we are about to begin. So Tim, I want to introduce you and tell us a little bit about your background, how you came to CBS News, and a little bit about the VJ program as it is today.
Sure. Okay, so just a little bit about me. From Pennsylvania. I'm a Penn State graduate. Got my first job in local news, of course, crashing in my parents' basement, so I was looking really to get out of there any way possible. In 1998, I got a call by a guy who was running the assignment desk at the Fox News Channel. He asked me if I was interested in being a desk assistant there. I said absolutely. I had no idea what the Fox News Channel was. Not many people did in 1998. So that's where my career began, and for the next 12 years, I played every single role that you could have in news gathering at the Fox News Channel on the assignment desk. Overnight desk assistant, overnight assignment editor, overnight manager, weekend manager, political editor, futures, planning. When I was done there, after about 11 and a half years, I was the director of domestic news gathering. Decided it was time for a change, so I went over to Bloomberg. I wanted to test the water in financial news, where I spent a year at Bloomberg. They have strange titles there, but I was the head of news gathering, so it was the guy running the assignment desk. What I learned there was that I did not want to work in financial news, but it was a good thing to try out. And then I was looking for a bit of a change. I wanted to continue to learn news gathering, manage news gathering, but I was really interested in not being kind of chained to the assignment desk I'd been for almost 13 years. So I saw an opportunity here to be the director of digital news gathering. It was taking over for the gentleman at CBS who started the digital news gathering group here, and I jumped at that chance. I thought it would be a good chance to learn some new skills, to work with some really young, smart, talented people. And at the same time, I was also offered a job in special events. So fast forward to today, I'm the director of digital news gathering and also the director of special events here at CBS News. Just a brief history lesson on digital news gathering at CBS News. Digital news gathering and the digital journalism department as we know it here today was born out of the 2008 election cycle. A lot of people are familiar with the fact that the networks, cable networks, and news channels and the broadcast networks going into election years will usually beef up their political units. They'll bring in, either you want to call them off-airs or embed reporters. We call them off-airs here. So I've gone through that cycle before, and something that you're always stuck with as a manager is what do you do with this 8 to 15 individuals who have just basically given up their life, run and gun around the country. You come to election day, they take a week off, they come back from their vacation, they say, okay, what do we do now? So my predecessor here had the bright idea of starting the digital news program. He took each of the embeds from the 2008 class. He kept a bunch in New York, sprinkled a couple of others around the country, and that's how the digital journalism program was born at CBS News. And we function much like those off-airs or those embed reporters. And that's kind of how we came to be today.
So, maybe this is an opportunity to move on to ask Adriana a real quick question about, what Tim just explained and how it's different than the traditional form of journalism that, like, for example, I grew up with. There was a correspondent, and there'd be an audio guy, and there'd be someone with lights, and there'd be someone with the camera. But now it's much more streamlined. So, Adriana, tell us a little bit about your experiences with it, a little bit about your background and how you have evolved into this new role that has changed the way we cover the news business.
Sure. I started in news at a time when this new trend was really taking off. So I was really lucky. My first job was at Channel 1 News, which is a show broadcast in schools. And the model at Channel 1 is everyone needs to know how to shoot, how to write, how to edit, and you did all three of those things almost every single day. So that was a great preparation for entering the digital journalist unit, which I next did. And it's a whole new way of doing things. Like you said, normally you have a correspondent, a producer, maybe an associate producer, a cameraman, a sound guy. That's 5 people who sometimes, when it's appropriate, will be molded together into one person if there's one person that can do the job. So people in the digital journalist unit like me, we all have a camera. We have laptops. Some of us can use certain transmission equipment, and we can be sent off to far-off places in the U.S. or just downtown or wherever it is to try to get an interview, to cover a press conference, to try to find a politician who's expected to come out of a location. And a lot of times it's really helpful when you're just one person because you blend in a little bit more. You're not as obtrusive. So you definitely have to have different hats on. You're a producer, you're asking questions, you want to make sure the video looks good, and CBS has done a great job in training all of us to try to make us as great as we can be.
So, it's funny that when you were talking about, tell us a little about the story that you just covered a few minutes ago, how it would have been covered a little, 2 years ago, 5 years ago. I mean, you are doing a lot more than just, the traditional Channel 1 reporter job that you were doing, when you first started.
Absolutely. Now the sky's the limit. I was in Kansas for one story and decided to pitch another story about a drought that's happening there. And I didn't need to call New York and have them send out a cameraman or send out a producer or send out a correspondent. I was able to pitch myself to shoot, do the questions, be the correspondent. I'm hoping to edit the story. I don't know if that's going to fly, but we'll see. And write it myself. So you have a lot more control and creative control, which is great. But you still have to depend on your senior producers, your editors, and your colleagues to vet your story and to make sure that it's really strong and make sure that your script is strong and that your tracking, your audio recording is really good. At Channel 1, we would go out in teams a lot, usually 2 people together, sometimes 3 if it was a big enough story. And in traditional news, normally you'll send out 3 people for a similar type of story at least.
So Tim, talk about some of the specific skills that you look for in a VJ, and after that, maybe you can explain where they actually a prospective journalist can learn some of those skills. Everybody learns how to be a reporter, but how do you learn how to edit and shoot and be good at it? Sure.
But before we get off what Adriana is currently doing, I'm going to say this because I know she won't. Adriana is definitely a trailblazer in our unit. She's actually taken a setup and a model of evolving into journalism next step, and she's actually, I think, taking it in a direction it's never taken before, going down the correspondent path, and she's having some really good successes with that. I use Adriana as a recruiting tool to young reporters who may have some hesitation about getting into this line of work, and to try to kind of broaden out their thinking about what a reporter is and what skills a reporter needs. So let's talk about some of the skills, and again, I'll use Adriana because she's here. Adriana was one of the best candidates I ever hired, and I was saying that before I even met her. I mean, I know what they do at Channel 1. Some of the best people I've recruited have come from Channel 1, or they've come from New York 1, because those are the shops that are building the journalists that have to do everything. They got to have all the skills. They have to be able to shoot. They have to be able to write. They have to be able to edit. They know how to deal with timelines. They can manage their own time. So what I'm looking for, the first thing I look for is someone from Channel 1 or from New York 1. But when I know there's not anybody there, those are the kind of skills I'm looking for. Colleges and the programs in higher learning have gotten a lot better with the technical skills. Now you're getting kids coming out of school that actually can shoot. They can edit. Some of them can write. Now, they still need a little real-world news reporting experience. There's no experience that can be recreated, like dropping someone in the field, like sending Adriana to Kansas on her own to get a drought story. You can't really teach that. So I'm usually a little hesitant to hire someone right out of college, but if someone has maybe 2 to 3 years where they've gotten out in the field a couple times, have made some mistakes, have learned from those mistakes, those I think are really attractive candidates. You also have to have the right personality, because you are doing jobs on every level of the ladder in news networks and cable. You are a PA logging a feed one day, and the next day you're performing a one-on-one interview with the biggest newsmaker of the day. So I think the person has to be really know how to control themselves. They really know how to deal with different kinds of personalities. It's really technical. A long time ago, as Adriana described, the way that news was gathered, not even that long ago, you would walk into a room and you had a lighting guy thinking about the lighting. You had an audio guy thinking about how we're going to capture the audio in here. You had a reporter going through the question. You had the producer making sure the seats were the right way. Well, now Adriana walks in the room and she has to do all of that. And all of that probably in a short period of time, because the person that she's interviewing is getting impatient and doesn't care about the lighting and doesn't care if the microphone works. So these are really, really challenging jobs. That's what I try to get across to people when they're going to. You've got to be really skillful, really patient with yourself, but really be able to act fast too.
Adriana, what is the hardest part of your job? I mean, that's a generic question, but I'm going to ask it anyways.
The hardest part, well, I'll start with the best part. I would say the best part is, at the drop of the hat, you could be halfway across the country interviewing someone really interesting, and people have this way of just letting you into their lives, into their homes, and opening up to you. And especially when you're one person, they really sometimes just let it go. So just, to me, that's a privilege to be able to get that kind of access to people from all walks of life. And you definitely get around a lot with this job, so that's fantastic, and travel and all that. The most difficult part, sometimes it's hard. You have to get to a point where you have like 5 different channels of thought going through your mind. One's on the lighting, one's on the audio, one's on the framing, one's on the interview subject, and then one's like, did I press record? You have to really be able to multitask. And with time it gets easier because things just become a little bit more second nature, knock on wood. So that's a challenge. And then also what's difficult is a lot of times we'll be sent out the door to go, find someone and interview them about some subject. And it's great because most of the time you get creative control over the questions. But every once in a while you miss a question that's what the producer was hoping for. For example, if I was interviewing Rahm Emanuel, I haven't done that, but let's say I'm interviewing the mayor of Chicago, or at a press conference where the mayor was speaking and someone from New York who was working on a story that's being put together in New York with a New York correspondent, New York producer, sent me just to get that one element, and I asked the questions, maybe I missed the angle that they really wanted. So there's always a little bit of anxiety sometimes when you're coming back with the tape, which is really a disc. Did I get everything that they really wanted? But that's why you ask extra questions sometimes, and that's why at the beginning, I think, toward the earlier part of your career, interviews tend to go longer. The longer you start doing this, the shorter they get. I just did an interview now that was 13 minutes, which is pretty good for me. Usually I'm closer to 20, which is kind of a disaster. But with time, you get better at these things, and the fact that you have, if I was doing a story for myself, the fact that you have so much control can sometimes be a double-edged sword, because maybe I missed something in the field that if I had someone next to me, they would have caught. But I do get access in the field that I wouldn't have gotten if I had a whole entourage. So
you shot a story tonight for tomorrow morning. How how are you involved in the piece? You're just going to feed the sound to New York, or are you going to actually help to cut the piece, or you tell us about today's experience and how is it different than perhaps yesterday's experience where you might be reporting and shooting your own stuff?
So today is unusual because I'm reporting and actually I have a crew, which is unusual. So today's not a great example of being a digital journalist. But I did use my iPhone today, and I recorded the audio of the interview as it was going on, and I FTP'd it to the producer who's working on the story in New York. So I got to be a little bit involved, digitally, if you will, and I helped set up the shoot and was able to be much more involved than a typical correspondent who maybe doesn't shoot as well in, decisions on where are we going to set up the interview subject, where the light's going to go. While you do that, I'll help set this up. So I was able to be part of the team in that way.
So, Tim, this brings me to a follow-up question regarding the use of consumer technology. I mean, Adriana showed her iPhone and how she was recording the audio and then FTP'd it so they could get a head start. Are you seeing more and more uses of consumer technology in news gathering?
Absolutely. I mean, I think, look, that what Adriana did with her iPhone isn't even part of the standard course here, if I can say that. I think that's someone like her who's smart, knowing that they're in the field, knowing that they can make the process more seamless, the workflow better by getting the audio of the sound of the producer in New York, thinking ahead. Now they come back in the bureau. She has an idea where the story is. She can, manage the expectations of the producer who already has that sound. So that's just these guys using every little nook and cranny that they have. I have an opinion. You asked Adriana what the hardest part of her job is, and there's a lot of parts of her job is hard, but I think something worth pointing out is, CBS is a union shop, and we'll call it prosumer equipment, which is anything that a producer, a digital journalist is using, is different than the union equipment. So we're judged on a very subjective basis of that. I mean, our goal in everything we do as journalists is to be objective. What is sometimes ironic is that when we turn around and we are judged by our peers and our managers and anybody, it can be so subjective what we do. So, I'll have a lot of editors call me down and say, who shot this? And for the most part, we are excellent shooters. But we do suffer somewhat by the technology that, there are certain rules about the chips in our cameras that we can use. So I'd say, these guys, Adriana and her colleagues are so good that they don't hear this critique a lot. But that can be a major, major challenge to what they do. But they're all really excellent shooters, so that's good.
So we have VJs throughout the country. So how often do you pull them together to talk about their craft, how they can, there's new technologies. What kind of training program are we using to help these VJs succeed in their roles? So
this is how the lifeline of a digital journalist at CBS News goes. In a perfect world, you are hired. You usually know how to shoot and edit, but I will have you trained usually for 2 weeks. I'll bring someone in to do just some formal camera training. Then I always find that the greatest training you can get is to put a new person in with someone who's been doing it like Adriana and just have them hit the road together and do 2 or 3 different assignments. And I think that really fast forwards their evolution at CBS News. Then they're typically on a 3-year contract. So what I'm trying to do over the next 3 years is, find out what their career goals in life are. Where do they want to be in 5 years? Where do they want to be in 10 years? What kind of news interests them so I can be watching for those requests to come in. I'm also pushing them to be pitching their own stories. And, I'm trying to keep them in their comfort zone and be doing stories that they want to do. Once in a while, I'll challenge them and take them completely out of that just because I think it's good for growth. But we actually probably don't have enough good get-togethers. We recently transitioned to a new camera, and I think we all kind of stayed on the same page with that and spent a lot of time together and did a little bit of high-level training. So I encourage these guys to use whatever technology they have at their hands in new ways, like Adriana did with the MP3 and the audio today. But it's probably something that we actually should do more of, spending time together, talking through ideas. There's probably some room for growth there.
So Adriana, tell us some more of your tricks of the trade. without giving away, the candy store, if you will, because I mean that was a really cool, really cool trip. Anything else that comes to mind that you've used in the past that is kind of progressive and works for you?
Well, one thing that comes to mind that's totally not progressive and kind of the bread and butter of what we do is it's particularly important in what we do as digital journalists to do as much pre-work as you possibly can. Because when you're there and in the moment, the person that you're interviewing is going to want to be chatting with you, and you're trying to set up the camera and you're trying to engage them and get everything set up. That the basic things, like you should need to have your questions already ready and written down so that there's nothing that you forgot. This is kind of more logistical, but in terms of travel, we travel a lot. So you have to have TSA pre-checks. You can get through, the TSA lines. You check in on your flights on your way to the airport, because a lot of times you're sent to the airport 45 minutes before your flight. I've packed my gear in a way that I don't have to check bags. Tim knows this. It's a point of pride for me. So I don't check any bags when I travel, so that when I land, I just can hit the road and not wait for my bags, or nothing gets caught up. The iPhone thing, recording, like we talked about, recording audio while you do an interview so you can send it back to whoever needs it in New York earlier, is always great. Sometimes when I do interviews, if it's static, if it's on a tripod and I don't have to be holding the camera, I'll take notes while the person's talking. And I will, even with time codes, so that if there's a sound bite that I really like, I can have it right there and do it in real time. I think that's all that comes to mind for now.
Tim, this is kind of old news for some of our smaller markets and medium markets where, you have, when I went to journalism school, they were called one-man bands, but I don't like to sound, misogynistic. But where do you see this whole trend going? And I mean, at the network, it's increasing. How do you see it changing in small, medium, and big markets? How do you think it's going to evolve?
Well, I think you make a really good point. I don't know if you saw this week that TV Newser did a very nice big write-up because Margaret Brennan managed to use her iPad DeGero app from Baghdad when she was on the Kerry trip. And we feel really, any publicity is good publicity, especially if we're using smart new technology. But it's interesting. I went and read, I was interested to see what the comments were in the comment section. And what a lot of people point out, and I know is true, this type of digital news gathering, mobile, using DeGeros and phone technology to go live is exploding on a local level. It's just now that places like CBS News, the network, and I know they're doing a lot of it at ABC. We're kind of playing a little bit of catch up, I think, with the locals. They've particularly made the DeGeros, which we use here, part of their everyday news gathering, and have scaled back a lot on the trucks. So I think you're going to see a steady growth on the locals and medium level at that, but that's already happening. It's actually us now on the network level, I think, trying to play catch up with that, and that that comes into a bit of a conversation on quality. There was a time when networks, I think, were afraid of that technology because the quality was sometimes questionable, but always wasn't there. But the quality has increased a lot, and as we use it more and more, we gain a lot more confidence on that. CBS this morning absolutely loves using the DeGeros. They want Seth Doan to be using them where he is. They've been using Lane Quijano at the World Cup nonstop with it, and it's saving us a lot of money. We don't have to pay for the satellite technology. So right now, I think you're seeing the big broadcast networks playing a little bit of catch up with the local guys who have really perfected this stuff with their mobile weather labs, and I think you're going to see networks using a lot more of that stuff. Hard to predict really what the people on the local level are going to do next. I still think they have a long way to go with the uses of the DeGeros and the live views and the mobile technology and IP streaming. But I think it's going to keep going in that direction for a long time, and I just think the quality and the reliability is just going to continue to get a lot better.
And Tim, for some of our viewers who may not be familiar with the DeGero and the live view, I mean, I guess the way to describe a DeGero is literally a satellite truck and a backpack that uses cell phone
That's
technology.
it. That's exactly what it is. It's a combination of different kinds of air cards that combines together to give you a really strong signal strength, so that you can send live video, live audio, or tape video, tape audio through cell phone networks.
So, Adriana, we see all this technology coming down the pike, and it's your job almost to stay ahead of the curve. And when someone like Tim says, "Okay, I'm going to send you out and cover this story. I'm going to have you may need to use Degero." You may or may not have done in the past, but you're going to have to get up to speed pretty fast. How difficult is that?
Luckily, we are a tight-knit group in DJ units, so it's usually just a matter of making a phone call to one of my colleagues and saying, "How do we do this again?" And I'll have them walk me through it the night before, and then the next morning I just do exactly what they say, and people are always available. Recently, I had to do a live shot for CBS.
Oh, well, I think Adriana might have had a little.
Yes.
You still there, Adriana?
The control room and things like that. And I called one of my colleagues, Diaz. She walked me through the whole thing the night before, and it all worked out.
Awesome. So, Tim, do you see the VJ program expanding, or you think at CBS News we're at a good number of team members, if you will? Or do you see it really becoming, the way we do business, in the future, the majority of the way we do business?
Yeah, I definitely see it expanding, and that's a bit of self-promotion and wishful thinking on my part, but I would argue that it makes really good sense. I see it expanding. It's becoming the way that we cover a lot of stories. Personally, I want to put at least one digital journalist in every one of our domestic bureaus, so that leaves Miami and Dallas to go. Beyond that, I wouldn't mind working out some deals with O&Os where we put a CBS News digital journalist at an O&O's assignment desk. They work for both parties. They've got their eyes and ears on the affiliate and what they're doing. They can tell the affiliate what the network is doing. We can decide to dispatch them to Newsgather for both of us. Then I would love to get this going overseas. It's happening on certain levels overseas. There are a lot of digital journalists around the world, but I would like to actually have a group that is kind of managed from New York and assigned and dispatched from here. So just keep it really organized. But yes, we're absolutely going to grow. The next step here at CBS News will be looking ahead to 2016, and that'll be here a lot quicker than any of us know it. So we'll go on a very heavy recruiting plan for our next set of political off-airs. I've already been approached by a lot of internal candidates already. So this form of news gathering is not going anywhere. It still continues to catch on here. Summer is the perfect time to actually test the way we news gather. For instance, I was at CBS this morning's editorial meeting, as I go to it every day, just to kind of see where I can plug digital journalists into their plans. They're very interested in doing a follow-up on the KFC story out of Mississippi, where allegedly a girl came in mauled. We don't know what happened there. So, of course, it's summer. How do we get to this story in a way that we're not going to bust the bank? It's summer. We don't want to do that. We're spread thin throughout the South. A lot of correspondents are off. So it wasn't even me. It was the executive producer of CBS This Morning, Chris Licht, said, wouldn't it make sense just to send a DJ down to Newsgather? He said, I don't think we need to be there, but get them on the ground, get some original reporting going, have them work with the affiliate. Let's get the best of all the elements we can, have them FTP or Degero that back, and we can just run it from New York. And I said, that's the way we should do these kinds of stories. So it's exactly what we did. I've got one of Adriana's colleagues on her way to Mississippi right now. In a perfect world, I would have sent someone from Atlanta, but he's on vacation too. But anyways, we're going to get this story all for the cost of likely a plane ticket. And that's just smart news gathering. So, yeah, it's catching on. It's just like the technology itself is catching on. And, what we have to crack is, the nightly newscasts. I think the nightly newscast will be the last to kind of break away from the most standard form of news gathering, which is the correspondent, the producer, the audio tech, the camera person. We've had great success with that, but it's still not their primary way of thinking when it comes to a story. So we're working at it every day, and it'll catch on in a big way. But it already has caught on, but it'll catch on throughout all of news, I think.
Well, I was just about to ask Adriana a question as we begin to wrap up here, because I'm going to give last call for anybody who has any questions on our app. So, Adriana, I'm glad you're back. I mean, I got two messages out of what Tim was saying. One is that you can never take vacation again, and second is that you know, what kind of advice would you give? We have a lot of young journalists watching this program right now, and a lot of them are in smaller markets, or actually some of them are actually trying to break into the business. What, you know, I'm going to ask you to give me the standard, you know, Adriana Diaz advice to the success of a DJ and getting into the program.
I would say, thank you, Ryan. My fellow DJ Ryan just passed me my laptop bag because my computer's about to die. So my producer, let me just plug that in.
One of the wonderful things about technology.
This is teamwork.
Yeah, well, and electricity is so overrated.
So, yeah, rule number one is make sure everything is charged. Your batteries, your laptop, always very helpful. You know, I think it's hard because a lot of people now know how to shoot, know how to edit, coming out of school, so it's a little bit more competitive. I don't know, maybe Tim probably knows better than I do, than when I started in the DJ unit a few years ago. But I would say try to get as much journalistic experience as possible. So if that means interning on the weekends at your local affiliate and trying to go out on your own and get elements by yourself so that you have more than just the technical skills, but also the editorial skills. I think that would be great, because a lot of people say, well, how do you even get a reel together if you're just coming out of school? But I think it's just a fact of putting in the extra time, volunteering, going somewhere where you know the model is one-man band based, like Channel 1 where I worked, or New York 1 where my colleague Vidya used to work, and getting your first experience there, or at your local station or whatever it is. Local stations have been one-man banding for a very long time. And then I would say to just be really flexible. You know, this job requires you to be able to travel at the drop of the hat, and you have to be game for that. And just really try to develop, you know, not only your technical skills, which should be at a certain level that can be broadcast on a network like CBS, but also, you know what makes a story, what questions are appropriate, what questions are inappropriate, what holes do you need to fill in a story, because I think it might almost be worse for a digital journalist to be sent out on a story or on an interview and come back with something that totally missed the mark. You know, it's going to be really hard for that person to get the trust of the producer or the manager who sent them out, rather than the framing being wrong. Because there's a little leeway, there's a learning curve there. But if the person just doesn't get the point of the story and what the story is, I think that's more difficult. So I would just work to really develop those journalistic skills, whether it's writing for your paper at school or whatever it is, in addition to the technical stuff.
And Tim, what are your thoughts as we close up here about what Adriana just said about the quality, the control, the how things are changing? How would you sum that up?
I agree. I think Adriana hit some really important points. If you want to tell people how to get into this, how to get good at it, it's you've got to put in a lot of extra time, especially if you're a young journalist and you can do that. Once you get old like me, you don't have that kind of time anymore. So my boat has sailed. But you want to take the extra time, volunteer, ride along with a one-man band, plug yourself in every situation you can, because that's, at least in my experience, those are the people who are standing out to me right now. When a lot of people have the same skills, I know who has put in extra time, who's volunteered to work on stories when that's not their job. Adriana makes a good point. It's, you can be a good shooter, but if you don't know how to put a story together, then you're just a good shooter. So you've got to get good at all of these different skills. it's challenging and scary to stay up with the technology. I'm scared because I'm scared every time we decide to buy a camera because I know in 3 months that camera is going to be an old camera. But you've got to just kind of take some chances and be confident in what your decisions are and do your best to stay abreast of the technology. But do what you can. And I think Adriana made a really good point in the way that our unit works. So I haven't worked with other groups of digital journalists at other networks. I've just worked on assignment desks, and they've worked really well together. But I've never seen a group with so little competition. They really are their very own little help desk. And at a notice, an email goes out to the group. I don't understand this setting on my camera, or the DeGiro won't connect, and it's like a race to see who can jump in and help your colleague out. So I don't know if that's just unique to CBS News. I think it's great, and I think it's helped Adriana in situations, and it's allowed Adriana to help her colleagues in situations. So I know the business can be really competitive, but when it comes to really fast-moving technology and changes in the way we do things, it helps to kind of stick together when you can, too.
Well, it's great to have the team back into the news team, if you will. Adriana and Tim, thank you very much for your time today, and thank you everyone at NAHJ for watching. We'll leave the Q&A board up for a little while if you want to have some follow-up questions, and I'll pass it along to Adriana and Tim. And again, thank you very much, and we'll see you next time. Have a great day, everybody.